All right, guys, we're going to kick off. So thanks for joining. I am Courtney Letema. I'm the Director of Inside Sales here at Winslow Technology Group. I am joined by Katherine Chipdey of Automox. She is the Senior Director, Solutions Engineering and Alliances at Automox, which is a mouthful, so hopefully I didn't screw that one up. But we appreciate you guys. I'll give you a quick overview of what the agenda is going to look like, and then we'll get kicked off. So I'll do a quick overview of Winslow Technology Group for those of you who don't know who we are. And then I will hand it off to Katherine for all of the information that you actually came for today. She'll run us through Automox, how it simplifies your endpoint management, how it is not just a patch management solution anymore, how it is a true endpoint hardening solution. And then we will do Q&A and wrap up. So if you have any questions, please throw them in the question box and we'll get to those at the end. We are also raffling off a Bonfire 2.0 solo stove today. As we mentioned, it is very cold up in the Northeast, but it's also cold down here in Tennessee where I am. So very jealous of whoever wins that. But we will randomly pick the winner after the webinar, and then you'll get an email from me. I'll ask you where we should send it to, and we'll go from there. So to kick us off, who is Winslow Technology Group? So for those of you who don't know, we are headquartered in Waltham, Massachusetts, and then we also have locations in New York, Charlotte, and DC. I personally am down here in Nashville, Tennessee. We started out as a data center solution provider. We have since that, in 21 years of conception, grown into so much more than that. So in addition to our data center team that we handle, we also have my team. My team is an endpoint solutions group team. So we handle anything from the laptop to the endpoint protection, patching, endpoint hardening, services, and all of that stuff. We also have our professional services team who handles all of the deployments, any kind of health checks and assessments and things like that. And then we have also built an entire security portfolio, which we will talk about here in a couple of slides as well. Really, like, our goal is to identify game-changing technology and then partner with partners who we think provide the best outcomes with our customers. So we work on navigating technology better together. We really focus in on how do we bring passionate people to our customers that provide the expertise they need, that deliver the outcomes that are needed. We focus really on 5 big pillars. The first one is our customers. So that's you guys. Thank you guys for being here. Without you guys, we are obviously not here. The second one is our employees. So are our employees happy? Do they enjoy working here? Do they have that passion? Do they have that expertise to provide those outcomes? And then we look at our partners. So partners such as Automox, right? Do they provide the outcomes that we need? Do they provide the expertise? Are they offering game-changing technology that really helps our customers to take their IT above and beyond? And then we look in our community. Are we taking care of and giving back to the people that give to us? I personally am a little biased there. I lead our diversity and outreach group here at Winslow, so that's a big one for me. And then we talk about our investors, which is Scott Winslow, and how do we make him happy? Because he is the only one that is our investor, we're able to focus on the first 4 before we worry about that one, which really helps us to provide that passion, expertise, and those outcomes. All right, so security, which is why we're all here, right? It's a huge topic right now in the world. I know that our school district just had an incident here recently here in Tennessee. It knocked out our internet for all of our kids for 2 weeks. My son came home shocked that he could learn without internet as a kindergartner. So we really have focused in a lot on cybersecurity here lately. And how do we work around the NIST framework to create those solutions that help customers to build those environments? So we really leverage that NIST CSF 2.0 framework. We're going to talk a little bit about what Automox does and how they fit into some of these today. But we do have a full solution around security and happy to help with any customers with that stuff. So without further ado, the reason everybody came is for Katherine. So we'll let her talk about some Automox stuff, and then I will be back at the end to wrap us up and answer some questions. Don't forget to throw them in the question box. And Katherine, all yours.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Yeah. Really excited to be here. Obviously, we've been working with the Winslow team for a very, very long time. And by way of introduction, I've been at Automox for about 4 years now, which, you know, feels like more 20 years, I think, when you look at technology and how the landscape has changed even in the past 5 or so years. But it's been really fun because, you know, I've gotten to talk to thousands of customers at this point, and companies at my time at Automox. And a lot of what I've noticed is there's a pain around endpoint hardening, right, Courtney? You kind of mentioned that everybody is feeling. And so I wanted to start out just with a little bit of kind of a sanity check of why that pain is happening. And so I look at it kind of in three groups, right? The volume problem, the time problem, and the tool problem. And so when you look at just the volume, right, this is just the published CVEs over the past 10 or so years, and that number has like quadrupled, right? If you look at what we're predicting for 2024. And when you ask a team, I mean, feel free to throw this in the chat. If your team has quadrupled in 4 years, we know who has the money, but I've never talked to a single team that actually has had resources, double, let alone keep up with the pace and the volume of vulnerabilities and risk in the environment. Very interesting as well for 2024 and 2023, first years where 0 days were exploited more than just patches. So keep that in the back of your mind when we're talking about endpoint hardening and why the holistic approach is so important. But kind of, the stats are just a way of, again, sanity checking. This is a really kind of rolling the ball up a hill consistently type problem for teams. They don't feel like there's a way for them to handle it today. And then there's also that tool problem. We talk about, well, why can't we really handle this well? You have that volume, and then in this space of endpoint hardening, of patching, of configuring, you've got really legacy tools, right, for lack of a better way of putting it. So that is on-prem, right, legacy services, servers to match your servers, some sort of VPN or network dependency. They're very inflexible, lack of scale, right, for your remote workforce or for your virtual machines, your physical machines, your changing infrastructure. And more so directly related to that volume problem, there's very minimal automation, right? There's no real way to handle that problem with these tools today effectively. And then you see this time problem. It's kind of a culmination of the two. So you have that volume, you have the lacking tools, and what we're seeing is adversaries are able to weaponize, right, those exploits in under 7 days, but teams are taking over 100 days to actually remediate those critical vulnerabilities holistically. And so that's a pretty stark number. It's a pretty stark statistic and maybe surprising to some folks, but I kind of think of it as like all the tools that are finding problems, all the security tools, the vulnerability scanners, XDR, EDR, right? They're all cloud native, they're all autonomous, zero trust, whatever buzzword you want to throw in there. And so we needed a better way to handle the actual fix of those endpoints, right? Actually fixing and hardening those devices. So that's a little bit of the background and where Automox comes into the space and why we're getting that, over 90% of our customers are able to harden their infrastructure in 24 hours rather than in, over 100 days. So Automox was the first cloud-native endpoint hardening tool to the space. Just important because when you think about, again, the first cloud-native EDRs in the space versus, the Symantec's and Kaseya's, great players, but there was a need for change, right, when it came to how we were addressing endpoint detection response, very similar to what our founders saw in the remediation side of the house. And so first cloud-native tool really allows for that 0 to deploy to I'm actually fixing things in minutes, which if you're using, other tools of the space today, that's not really the case, right? I have 6 months of training, I've got 6 months of standing this thing up, whatever the case may be. So really fun to be able to present such a different immediate resolution to a lot of these customer pains, but then also the first tool to do that across operating system and some integrations we'll talk about too, right, being SaaS-based cloud. But the bottom pillar here is kind of what Courtney was talking about, right? I think if you've heard of Automox or, if you're thinking of endpoint hardening in general, patching is foundational and it's kind of we say the low-hanging fruit that we know we need to be doing a better job of. Right? Not just patching your operating systems, but all the third-party applications in the space. And so, right, we'll definitely talk about how Automox is making that easier. If there is a takeaway from today, though, and Courtney knows I could talk about this forever, it's going to be the configuration piece of the house. And the best way to think of that is, what about all the unpatchable vulnerabilities, right? Start thinking about solo projects your team has had to do to remove fonts or admin permissions or applications or change certain health of a device through a configuration registry key edits, or the big one, is it a 0-day, there is no patch available. We'll get into how Automox helps wrap automation around all of that, not just patching, which has been pretty fun. I don't want to ignore patching, right? Because this orange line at the bottom is very quantifiable and has been, a real, I think, emotional piece for customers. The way that we've approached patching from the cloud in an autonomous manner has allowed companies to save, hundreds of hours on their manual tasks, or, babysitting of the patches going out, the manually packaging, the downloading, right? The having to address every time. And I'll do a very quick demo to kind of show you how in 60 seconds we have changed that game to consolidate the different operating systems. So not going to different tools for Mac, Windows, Linux, VMs, physical servers, workstations, right? Like teams have had to do in the past, but also consolidating the largest list of third-party applications that you see, some of them listed up here. So a lot of the vulnerabilities we're seeing teams have are around, okay, well, I have a bunch of Office updates, or Chrome is updating every day for me at this point, Zoom, right? Adobe products, Java, engineering, accounting, the list goes on and on. So, how do we set that baseline that allows me to get rid of that risk up front as soon as possible? But if you remember me earlier saying two things to hang on to, right? 0 days last year were exploited more than patch plus N availability. So really what that means is attackers are able to leverage and exploit those vulnerabilities that don't have a patch quicker and more effectively than ever before, right? Which is definitely concerning, considering we're actually seeing teams take longer to patch even when a patch is available. But again, we saw those three problems as to why, right? It's not a lack of trying, it's not a lack of effort for any of these teams, it's a circumstance of the volume, the time, and the tools. And so for Automox, and a lot of what we've been talking about the Winslow team on, with their platform and kind of their way of approaching security, is how do we start to help teams with everything that's not patchable? And so, Automox has been developing and really supporting this idea of automated hands-free configuration, which at its core, you can kind of see on the left-hand side, is really I can automate any action, right? It's PowerShell and Bash at its core for worklets, that's our term for it. But as we kind of start moving to the right of this screen, we also wanted to make sure that out of the box, I should say, teams had the ability to click a button, run configurations, and add that as a part of their baseline, right? So not just configurations for security and the health of your environment, but when it comes to things like 0 days, and you can kind of see this Automox time to remediation on the right-hand side, if I ask a team, well, what does that process typically look like? How long does it take? You're very rarely going to find a team that says, yeah, in under 50 minutes, we're able to go ahead and drop everything. We're able to find the fix ourselves, create it, test it, and then roll it out to, this diverse infrastructure and environment of ours. So not only do we have the architecture on our side for teams to go ahead and disperse these fixes, but we have our Automox engineering team observing for these 0 days, creating the fixes with our partners, and then making it available out of the box so that you can click a button and say, hey, Log4j has been a pain for 3 years almost for me at this point because I can't patch still. Let's go ahead and run a remediation that we've created with partners like Arctic Wolf to say we're going to run JD9 lookup and make adjustments to the jar itself rather than updating so that we're no longer vulnerable. We're going to make the registry key edits where needed, print nightmare, right? The list goes on and on for 0 days. And so that worklet catalog and kind of this idea of endpoint hardening shouldn't just be patching, right? It's foundational, but we need to be building a tool that at its core can holistically help you set a baseline of compliance, right? What does that mean for me as an organization? That means I obviously want to remediate 0 days as it comes, but it also means, right, I want to disable native Windows firewall for security reasons and make sure my firewall of choice is enabled. It means I want to disable admin permissions where they shouldn't be for remote users. I want to uninstall software at the user level and make sure it's only installed system-wide if it's approved software, right? I want to disable USB settings for my devices where they shouldn't be able to use USBs. And so kind of the list goes on and on, but that is what we've curated, and you can kind of see the use cases here in the middle of the screen to monitor, to deploy, to configure your devices as you need. And so it's been really fun approaching endpoint hardening this way, because like I said, it has become a bit of an emotional problem for teams where almost each one of these worklets would be an individual project, right, that these teams would have to take on. It would be pretty miserable to deploy, so on and so forth. And same thing with the patching. So this is a really important piece to me because, like I said, I don't think people are starting to realize, hey, we can automate patches and create a little bit of a more secure baseline. But we haven't started to crest, I think, the capabilities of automation around all the unpatchable vulnerabilities. And that's where we're really seeing results with partners like Winslow, with our security technology partners, with vulnerability scanners, right? So really excited to share that with you all. And this screen as well, right, is kind of the more important piece to me, because Courtney talked about, how do we actually quantify this and what's the impact that we're having for customers. And so this to me is the best visualization of when I'm telling you about setting that baseline and automating this risk away. This is a screenshot from a vulnerability scanner from one of our partners. And you can kind of see 1 million risk score on one device. If you have a vulnerability and scanner in place, that's not too far off from what a lot of them are saying, right? It could be third-party patches, it could be 0 days, misconfigurations. And no matter what this team is trying to do, they really weren't able to budge that risk score, right? And it makes sense if you think about the problems we talked about. If you think about, hey, patch is available, we deploy it, but then Patch Tuesday rolls back around, right? And we start the whole process again, and they're not getting smaller in terms of size. And so we looked at their environment, their scan results, and we basically said, here are the main policies that are going to be able to, in this case, knock your risk out 93%. They put that in place in one day, and you can see that next week's scan, the drop just in risk that this team had. And so this is really impactful, hopefully for not just me, but for everyone on this call to start understanding, that proactive approach. When I talk about proactive remediation and I talk about setting that baseline, it's really how do we put these rules in place with Automox, because we know what we want enforced consistently. And then we let Automox enforce that, not just from a patching standpoint, but from a configuration standpoint that's really going to get us results like this, because Log4j and Flash being installed and third-party applications that shouldn't be there that are really giving us this major risk isn't just coming from patches. So like I said, results like this are really what get me excited. But beyond that, I'm also very much a proof is in the pudding person. So we hadn't just talked about the results, but we talked about the road to get there is supposed to be easier than with any other solution. And so I do want to show you all the actual Automox console, so that you have an idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about this ease of use and the road to those results. And so considering we've only got a minute or two for this demo to really make that ease of use impactful, gonna lay out, right, lay of the land, 30,000 foot of that compliance I was talking about, those improved SLAs you're gonna see with Automox, from a lot of those highs and criticals being outstanding for too many months to keeping them where they should be, full calendar and breakdown of the environment as well, and that health. But the automation comes from the policies, right? They're synonymous. Policies are what make you compliant as a customer. And there's those 3 pillars we saw on that screen of Automox, right? The patch policies, the deployment, and the worklets for configuration. And so when I look at patch policies, it's really, what do you want to patch, who do you want to patch, and when? Right, that is all that's involved. We talked about there is no manual packaging or downloading or the work that typically has to go in. It's what, who, when. And so for the what, you do have the ability to kind of get as wide or as granular with what you want to target for patches. So to kind of do this speed run of an example, Patch All is going to cover everything we natively support. So you heard it's that OS and the largest list of third-party applications that we can definitely share out with the Winslow team and you all today. But I can also get more granular than that, which I'll show, right? Maybe I just want to target third-party. Maybe I just want to target OS. Then you have the who, which is native Automox grouping. You can start to assigned to devices, but you can also use attributes of the device like, host name, multiple tags off criteria, ADOU, so on and so forth. And then it's just the when, right? When do I want this happening? So to follow with this example of setting a baseline, something like a patch all policy, which covers everything, I maybe want to run once a month, right? This gives me the ability to say, it's kind of my catch-all policy, right? Whether it's a Monday or Friday, if you see any outstanding OS or third-party updates, Automox, I want you to go ahead and deploy that. Now for, kind of the deepening that example, if I click into patch only, this is going to be, maybe patch only my third-party problem childs. So I can go ahead and start searching for things like Chrome and specifying the package, because now I'm in a patch only policy, the ones we talked about that always have issues. And I can go ahead and up this cadence to every week, right? Every week I want to make sure that the third parties are getting looked at and patched. And for a final clearing of the example, I can go ahead and target by severity for things like, critical third parties or critical Windows updates to say that needs to be hardened within 24 hours, right? And every single policy also has customizable notifications to allow you to be more lenient, less lenient with your end users, and full interaction there, right? So in about 2 minutes, we've been able to set 30-day SLA for everything, 7 days for our target third party, and 24 hours for third party or critical applications and critical updates. And of course, you can get more granular, you can be less aggressive, more aggressive with the tool, but point being, very different experience from the manual targeting and packaging and downloading that we've had to do. And when I talk about the catalog, now how easy it is to go a step beyond and start searching for those projects that were really manual for me. This is that catalog of configuration changes that we build out of the box, we add to as there's a new CVE or there's a new 0-day that's, really stressing out customers. So I can go ahead and sort through the CVE fixes and security concerns that our teams have noticed and it's been a problem or we're seeing in our vulnerability scanner. I can go ahead and search for something like, Flash is always an issue for teams, and I want to go ahead and keep that uninstalled, right? So when I start to think about the use cases that I can build out, now very similar to a patch policy, I can start associating these configuration changes to my devices. You'll notice at its core, you can see the scripts we're actually running, searching for Flash. If it's in the environment, go ahead and remove it. And now I can have this run once a week, once a day, right, as part of my baseline to say, if you ever see Flash, remove it. And that goes back to all the use cases we talked about of maintenance tasks, security settings on the devices. What do you want this device to look like, right? BitLocker configuration, different system preferences and settings. So I definitely encourage everybody to give this catalog a view and start to, think about those projects that have been very manual for you or just painful for you, right? That you have the ability now to automate away with Automox. And so, like I said, hopefully from that standpoint, that was beneficial, right? In terms of actually seeing it. I'm a visual person, so, like I said, I definitely get that. And let me go ahead and bring our deck back as well, just to wrap up everything that we've talked about between Courtney and I. Again, those results is very important to both Automox and Winslow, right? So seeing it as far as the demo goes, but also what is the capabilities that I've kind of talked about today for the past 20 minutes, what does that mean to you as a customer, right? Why is this important? From that immediacy we talked about, right? 0 to deployed to actually automating in minutes versus weeks or months, that risk reduction we talked about. So not only less time to reduce that risk, but keeping it there is the key, right? We're setting those policies so that we're keeping that baseline. We're not seeing those spikes. We're not going through, the loops again for teams, and doing it in a way that's not only lower cost due to the infrastructure that we have and the cloud native support, but lack of manual work that these teams have to keep supporting. So like I said, hopefully that was beneficial, just to kind of run you all through an overview, what we do beyond patching, some of the results you can see. But happy to pass it back to you, Courtney, see if we did get any questions or anything else you want to add.
Awesome. Thank you, Katherine. I really appreciate that. So I'm super passionate about Automox. I think Katherine and I have talked about this a number of times. When we initially became a partner of Automox, it was very much a patching solution. And so to see the evolution of it over the years has been really fun, and just kind of seeing all the really cool things it could do. I love the worklet side of it. That's something that I also find super interesting. So thanks for running us through it in the demo and everything. So for those of you who are on with us, so what's next, right? Like we did a quick overview of what it looks like. Katherine did a great job. So what do we do from here? A couple different options or suggestions, I should say, is one, we can schedule a more personalized demo with you guys, right? So Katherine ran through it pretty quickly, 2 minutes. There's a lot more we could show with the Automox team. So if you're interested in learning more about how it fits specifically in your environment, maybe running certain worklets that have caused issues for you guys or tasks that have caused issues for you guys, we could definitely help with that. So we will send out a survey at the end of this, but you can fill out in there that you want to do that. Also, you can reach out to myself, your account executive, whoever you have a contact with. And then also Automox offers a 15-day free trial as well. So if that's also something you want to kick off and check it out, feel free to let us know. We can get you guys set up with that. But we will go ahead and start moving to questions because we do have a couple of them. If you have another question, you haven't put it in the chat, go ahead. We'll get to as many of them as we can. If we get to the end and we haven't covered yours, we'll make sure to get that out to you. So Katherine, question number 1 came through. It says that it would be nice to have a single pane of glass, not only for endpoints, but also servers, network devices, and other things like UPSs and cameras. Does Automox have hooks into the CVE list for non-endpoint devices similar to a Tenable?
Yeah, so Automox today is only covering full operating system. So it'll be those virtual machines, those servers, those workstations, but does need a full Mac, Windows, or Linux operating system on it for us to kind of deploy that light agent and be able to actually fix, right, whether it's patch or configure the devices. We've definitely considered expanding. I think the reason we haven't yet is just we've seen such a gap in folks being able to manage those core endpoints properly that, you know, that's the space we're focused on helping in, but definitely down the line, right, mobile devices as well is something that we're looking at going into FY25 for us.
Awesome. What about deploying new software, not just patching it?
Yep, 100%. So deployment, uninstallation, all of that we can automate as well. Quickly showed that on that third screen, but you can upload basically any payload, start to automate the deployment of that onto your Mac, Windows, Linux devices as well. So we've seen a lot of teams with the Winslow group go through that cycle of Automox is a core thing that's installed on a device or an image, but from there we take care of the management, not just of patching and configuring, but making sure all the devices have endpoint protection, making sure that they have, you know, their approved list of software like Zoom is what we use, or, you know, other applications for accounting, engineering. Long way of saying, yep, definitely for software deployment too.
Awesome. And then somebody asked for a little bit of clarification on what a 0-day is. Can you explain that for those of you who are unaware?
Yeah. So 0 days essentially when a patch isn't available, right? When there is an exploit that doesn't have a fix that's been basically published or released yet. And so, you know, 0 day will often have to be fixed, some sort of PowerShell script that needs to run to make an edit to the software itself, right? Log4j is technically not a 0 day anymore because patch is available. But the reason I brought it up as an example is because a lot of companies still can't patch the application itself because it's just involved in, you know, application code or, you know, dev code that they can't necessarily easily upgrade to the next version without having massive company-wide issues. But in general, right, a 0 day is where, hey, I can't just upload a patch. The fix isn't available yet. The vendor hasn't released a fix. And so there's this time frame where attackers can actually exploit this, and it's a lot harder for companies and customers to get remediation out. And so that's why fixed details for 0 days are super important. That's why we partner with companies like Arctic Wolf and CrowdStrike and these other vulnerability scanners, because there are the tools that are constantly doing research, not just on the detection of these 0 days, but, you know, how do we fix it if there's not a patch available?
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Katherine, for your time today. Fantastic demo, fantastic presentation. Everybody, thank you guys for joining us. We appreciate you guys spending 30 minutes with us. If you asked a question, we didn't get to it, we'll shoot you over an email with the answer to it. I will be reaching out to whoever wins the solo stove here in the next 30 minutes to an hour. And we really appreciate you guys and your time today, and looking forward to continuing the conversations with you guys.
Thanks so much, all.